Hello everyone and welcome to another programming video. This video is going to cover how to program Sparks using Java. Sparks are very easy to code and they're very simple. They're just like those little white puck things, and they say Spark on them, and you hook up the wires to the motor that you're using, and you hook the PWM wire up to the RoboRio, and then you're ready to code it and get ready to just jump in. So why don't we just jump in and show you. What we used our Spark for was for our rotator. And what our rotator is what rotates our shooter to shoot the ball. So then we can rotate it up, down, to a certain angle of some sorts. But yeah, so we rotate it using a Spark. And we do that because we're going to have a soft limit, we're going to have a soft limit on it. So then it doesn't go all the way in one direction. So let's start out with our subsystem. You want to create a subsystem. I called ours rotator, but that's because that's what we're using the Spark for. So whatever you're using the Spark for, make that like that so. And then you can remember you can create a subsystem by just right click on subsystem, create a new class list. Then you can scroll down to subsystem, click it, create name, enter, go. But I'm not going to do that once again because I have the subsystem already ready. So then you have to start off by making imports. The imports you need for this aren't that many. You're going to need to import, your package and your normal import. And then you got this right here is the command I use, which you're going to need to create a command later on for this. So remember to import it when it comes to that part of the video. Import subsystem. And then the only thing that you really need to import as of now is this line right here, the one that imports all the Spark information. Make sure you have all the vendor libraries you need for that. Scroll down. I have a deadband right here. It doesn't really matter though. But yeah, within public class rotator extend subsystem, you're going to want to make sure that you name your Spark. I named mine rotator because once again that's what it's being used for, so I thought that would be a smart choice. So then scrolling down, public rotator parentheses bracket, and in here this is where we're going to classify it. So rotator is equal to new Spark 1, and whatever this number is the slot that you put the PWM wire. So for us, we put it in 1. Something I would like to tell you guys is that for our team at least, I'm not sure if it's an issue for other teams, but when we put the PWM wire into slot 0, it wouldn't work, and it gave us a lot of errors. But as soon as we moved it to slot 2 or any other slot, it worked fine. So just keep that in mind if you are having a similar issue with your robot and you just don't know why it won't work and the light just keeps blinking blue instead of staying steady. Then try a different PWM slot, because that's what worked for us. We spent like a couple hours on it and we stressed about it, but in reality it was just as simple as trying a different PWM spot. Okay, then we got rotator.setInverted false. So you're like, oh no, the motors are going the wrong direction. When I push forward, it's going backwards, and when I push backwards, it's going forwards. Simple fix, just put this line in, change it to true. Send the code, try again. Okay, this will be important in a couple seconds. If you remember correctly, the int default command is for putting a command that this subsystem is going to use, which when we get to there, it's rotate fire is what we're using. And then for the last little bit that we got in here, we got public void rotator power double R. So right here, R is a variable, so you can just put in whatever you want for it. You can put in any letter that you could possibly want. But this is what it tells it. So if R is greater than or equal to 1, so if the value of R is equal to 1, R is equal to 1. And then else if R is equal to -1, then R is equal to -1. Or less than or equal to -1, then R is equal to -1. And then rotator.setR. So what this is all doing is it's getting a variable set for when we are going to use that variable for moving the motors. So the value will be R, and no matter what the R is, we can times it by anything, and no matter what, it will either be times by -1 or 1. So then that makes it very simple to apply the motor power, because then everything will be based on this value here. And no matter what, it's either going to be 1 or -1. And as we all know from math class, that if we times something by 1, it's going to be itself, and we times something by -1, it's going to turn the number negative. So then the last chunk down here, public void rotate, parentheses bracket, double X left joystick, which what this is right here, is it's saying the left joystick on one of our Xbox controllers is equal to 0.3 times robot.oi.xbox2.getAxis1. And what this is saying right here is times the power of the joystick on Xbox 2 and get Axis 1. Axis 1 you can find within the driver station where it's labeled, and then you can see what joystick axis it is. Each joystick controller has about 5 axes that you can use, and even the triggers count as an axis. So there's plenty of different axes you can use. We're just going to use one though, which is just the plain old X value on the first joystick. Next is rotator power, X left joystick. So remember this up here. So it's going to take that value from here, so it's going to take R, and it's going to multiply it by the X left joystick right up here. So when we look at this, so it's going to take whatever the value of the joystick is and multiply it by either 1 or -1, and also multiply it by 0.3. And that will determine the speed of the joystick, or the speed of the motor that's moving. So that's all nice and all, but there's a couple more things we have to do before this is done. We have to make sure that we make our class and set it to the default command. So to do so, you're going to want to scroll up on your command list, right click on command, create a new commander class, then you're going to go and click on the command one. And once you click on the command one, name it, create it, and go to it. So we named ours rotate fire. Okay, as you can see, as usual, it's pretty bare. There's only 2 things you really need to add. You need to add requires robot.rotator, and remember to make sure that you can put this in without an error. You're going to need to go to robot.java. Scroll down a little bit, make sure you name it. Your subsystem, make sure it's named in here. So rotator right here, so public static rotator, make sure you have it named. And you also want to scroll down a little bit more, you have to classify it in here. So rotator is equal to new rotator. Just make sure you do that so then it doesn't error you up here in the command. Let's move back to our command. So if you do that, then this will error and it will accept it. So robot.rotator, it's going to require that subsystem. And we're going to go down here in the execute. This is the part of the command that actually does something when it comes to running the code. So then robot.rotator.rotate, which if we remember correctly, in rotator, that is this right down here. So it's going to run this bit down here, this whole thing in these brackets. So it's going to run all that. And once you have that made, Control S for save, and then go in here, set default command rotate fire. And then once you do that, then this should all work. Another great example, if you're wanting another example about how to do sparks that we used, was for our slider. So once again, we're going to do the same thing. Make sure all our imports are in. Make sure that once you do the command part, you make sure you import your command. You import the spark. Then you go down here, public class intake slider extend subsystem. Classify the slider or the spark, and I classified it as slider because that's what it's being used for. And the slider on our robot is the part that carries the intake, so it slides out and it slides in. Very simple. And then you're going to need to make public intake slider. Slider is equal to new spark 2. So this is the PWM spot 2. And then slider.invert true. So that shows you that I was running the code and I was like, oh, that's backwards. So then I just put in true here, and then it fixed it, and it was inverted. There's the in default command that we're going to be using later on. New slider move, that's what we call the command. Down here, this is very familiar to, or not even familiar, basically the same to what we had for the rotator. So then we got public void slider power, double Z, so we use Z this time instead of R. If Z is greater than or equal to 1, Z is equal to 1. Else if Z is less or equal to -1, Z is equal to -1. Slider dot set Z. So once again, we're doing all this so then we can have the slider power be 1 or -1. And we got public void slider on, double X right joystick, so this is the right joystick this time, is equal to 0.5 power, so we can see that we needed more power this time. Multiplying it by robot.oi xbox 2, get x is 5. So the 5th axis on the Xbox controller, or at least for ours, is the second joystick. So slider power, X right joystick. So it's going to take slider power up here with its value Z. It's going to multiply it by this joystick. And it's going to take 0.5 and it's going to multiply it by that. So very simple subsystem right there. Then you're going to want to make sure that you create the command slider move. In here, the exact same, besides for instead of rotate, you're going to write robot.intake slider. Once again, make sure you go in your robot.java, enter all this stuff for your subsystem. So the slider part, which is right here. So slider stuff right there. And once again, you're going to come down here, make sure you classify it also. And once you do that, you're going to go back to your subsystem, make sure that it requires that, and then you are going to do robot.intake slider.slider on, which is then finally, once again, it's going to run this piece down here. Now when it runs that should cause the whole thing to work, and you should be having a working Spark. If anyone has any questions, please leave it down in the comments. I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope it was very helpful, and I hope the Force will be with you this year.